Just waiting from the ready from Vince. And there's the ready from Vince. So we get started in 3, 2, 1. Tetris. And we have a square and a crowbar to launch us into game 1. Both players off to fairly decent starts here. Both players should be Tetris ready nice and early on. Slight board issue for Oofie, but the piece sequence seeming to be a little bit mean. So Oofie's board actually being in a slightly nicer state than Vince's to start us off with, just because of those forced burns. But more forced burns for Oofie. Tetris for Vance. Vance now on to 69,000 hey now. But both players playing cleanly. 51,000 for Oofie now, getting a Tetris to 74,000. So a slight early advantage for Vince here. But a couple of burns for both players. This being a fairly standard 18 start. Both players getting a little bit high here. Vance taking some nice little burns. No Tetris for Oofie. Closing up the gap between our players. Tetris for both of them. And Oofie actually able to mostly catch up now. 149,000 plays 151,000. And both players are Tetris ready. Both players are Tetrising. Vince forced into a burning situation here. Oofie's board also not looking like the pieces are falling how he wants them to, but deals with them nicely. Vince in a little bit of trouble here, but nothing serious. And Toka didn't set an alarm and missed the opportunity to be streaming this match. I can't believe you'd do this, Toka. But are both players playing well at the moment, halfway through level 18. 269,000 for Oofie, 254,000 for Vince. I haven't necessarily been saying enough in terms of score updates recently. Oofie gets a Tetris, up to 316,000. 381,000 now for Vince. Vince on a much better board than earlier. Getting a Tetris up to 304,000. So staying about 2 Tetrises behind Oofie. And both players continuing to play cleanly at the moment. As we pass the 90 line mark on Oofie's screen and pass the 90 line mark on Vince's screen. Currently 2.5 Tetrises separate them, and about about half a Tetris of lines separate them. Toka supporting Oofie here. Oofie passed the 400,000 mark, and Vince approaching the 400,000 mark now. Oofie on 457, Vince on 420, hey now. So Vince managing to claw back some of that pace and getting a Tetris up to 445. 111 lines apiece here. And Vince on a much cleaner board than Oofie. Oofie getting clean though. 486 plays 468. And the line separating them in line count. Tetris for Oofie and Vince. So about a Tetris separating them now. As we hit the final run up to level 19. Both players on clean boards. So hopefully we shouldn't see an instant top as we hit the 19. Oofie, a single line away from transition, isn't getting the greatest of pieces. Vince transitions 541. Oofie transitions 555. But that board's not looking super ideal. Looks survivable. Can Oofie get the pieces across? Oofie can. So 585 plays 573. So neck and neck. Tetris for Oofie. Oofie not fearing playing a bit high here. Tetrises again. 637. Vince taking a couple of burns to keep the board under control. 642 for Oofie. Certainly not fearing being a bit high. And certainly feeling comfortable playing a bit dangerously here. The piece is not going in Oofie's way. Creating a bit of pressure here. But Oofie's dealing with the pressure. Getting the stack down. 654 plays 624. Tetris for Vance. Tetris for Oofie. Surviving the dig, getting the board down. He's forced to take a handful of burns now. This is Vince's chance. Tetris. 685 for Vince. 689 for Oofie. You can't get it much closer than this. Oofie Tetrises. Vance Tetrises. 2,000 points separate them. Oofie getting an extra Tetris in. Both players on level 24. Vance up high. Gets the Tetris to take things down. Vince getting another Tetris and having the lead now. 772 for Oofie. 786 for Vance. This might be a game that is decided by who can pace harder and not by who dies first. Although, as I say that, a couple of mistakes for Vince. This isn't an ideal board. Surviving it. Beginning to take it down. It's 786 for Oofie on level 27. It's do or die now. Vince on 840. And Oofie's going to top out on 210 lines. Which gives Vince game 1. And that's an amazing game to open this match. Vince drawing it out a little longer, getting its kill screen on 923. So dramatic game 1 to open this match. ready from both players. We have accidentally put 2 stars on the screen. There we go. That fixes it. That fixes it. Both players are ready. Let's see what happens in game 2. In 3, 2, 1, Tetris. Toka asking Oofie to take off his shirt. I can't believe you. Wait, no? Not ready? Vince, can you top out? We've had we're not starting yet. Oh, are we re-rolling each time? Do we increment or do we re-roll? Okay, we are just incrementing. That is, we're doing the traditional way. We're not doing the Scamper Das tournament. So we should be on 8-2, 8-2, 7-1, 6-A. Got it ready from Oofie. And ready from Vance. So we get started in 3, 2, 1, Tetris. So both players are off. And it's 49,000 for Oofie, 68,000 now, 91,000 for Vince. A couple of small mistakes here for Oofie. Surviving, getting a Tetris and getting things down a bit. But some more unideal pieces here. And the board's slowly getting higher. Gets a triple to take things under control. Couple more pieces and the board's starting to look high but healthy. And there's the Tetris to go up to 104,000. Vince, meanwhile, on 161,000, has a bit of a lead at this point in the game. Oofie at 153,000 points. Vince at 212,000 points. Vince, though, a few lines into the future, but not making any real difference. Vince with a strong lead here. Tetris for Oofie. Oofie's board not looking too bad at the moment, but also not looking perfect. Vince's board requiring a burn or two, but no longer requiring a burn or two, gets it under control. Gets a Tetris, goes up to 259,000 points. Oofie, meanwhile, getting a Tetris up to 224,000 points, but has a line or two in the future. As we head about halfway now. And Vince this time with the couple Tetris, or Tetris and a bit lead. You'll be getting a little bit high. keeping it under control, getting a Tetris as a reward. Tetris for Vince. Vince now about 2 Tetrises in the lead here on 354. Oofie currently playing catch-up. Oofie stream lagging for a moment, but coming back almost instantly. Tetris for Oofie. Tetris for Oofie. Oofie now with a points lead, but is in the future Vance through taking the points lead. Still behind in lines. 432 for Oofie. 469 now for Vince. Both players on about equal lines. Vince blocking the well as the bar comes. Vince creating a T-spin setup, gets it, then gets the Tetris. Vince leading by about a Tetris currently. Both players at 100 lines. And a nice JD spin says Toka. They did not see, or at least I don't think I saw the JD. I might have missed it. I might have been looking at it and not realized what I saw. 502 for Oofie, 539 for Vince. It's the T-spin, but in the other direction. That's just a T-spin! I refuse! I refuse your terminology, Tetris. Grr. But Vince in a bit of trouble here. As I get annoyed at Tetris naming conventions. Vince in a lot of trouble and hangs the J piece, and that's gonna be it for Vince. 605 is enough for Oofie. Oofie on 632 has enough for the game. Oh, this game does look maxable if you wanted to play that out, but I guess that sentence is a bit redundant now. So we move on from 8-2 to 9-3. And we have a ready from both our players. I mean, we have a ready from 0 of our players. I'm just lying to you like that, you know. Vince takes a drink. Double max next game, says Oofie. There's the ready from Vance. And there's the ready from Oofie. Let's get started in 3, 2, 1. Tetris. And pieces start falling on Vince's screen. Different pieces start falling on Oofie's screen. That is considered not ideal for a same piece set match. Can both players please top out? Oofie, you did not increment your seed. So, instead of 9-2 or 9-3 or whatever the fuck I said, let's have an A4. Like the piece of paper. Got it ready from Vince. Vince saying it's okay, that seed sucked. Oofie doing a strategic wrong seed there to avoid the pain and torture of that last one. But it gets started again in 3, 2, 1. Tetris! And so saying, this is why I keep telling the CT Vietnam staff that they need to do increment instead of reroll, so our players don't get it mixed up. That is a fair idea, actually. I know CT UK does reroll, which I think is a fun little quirky thing for the in-persons to do, because it means both players get to roll the seed. I propose what we do is we get a bunch of D16s. I don't know how cursed D16s are. I imagine they are somewhat cursed. But we get a bunch of D16s for in-person tournaments. And the players get to roll the seeds quite literally. I think I support that idea. But our players are off to identically good starts here. Both players briefly being on 74,000 and something points. Now our players being on 97 and 98,000 points respectively. And a single burn for Oofie would mean the players are equal again. Touches for both the players onto 100. On 100. I can't speak right now. 120,000. And briefly 121,000 exactly for both players. Oofie not on a board you'd want to be on. Gets a Tetris to take things down. In fact, it gets a dirty Tetris to take things down. Gets another double to take things lower. And is clean. Our players are back to being neck and neck. Will they go back to being on identical scores? We'll see in a bit. If they do, they are currently separated by 400 points. 171,000 apiece here. And Tetris for Oofie to spread us out. And the Loversman saying, I think instead of doing a D16, we make the players play something stupid like Mahong, and whoever wins gets to choose whether it's incremented or new seed. I like that idea, but can I raise you this? Our players do like a roulette or something, like roulette wheel, to decide whether or not who gets to pick what the seed is. So like if you just memorize one seed, you can just use that. You know? This is how we should do Tetris tournaments. We should add gambling, more gambling to Tetris. But 230,000 for Oofie, 272,000 for Vince. Memorizing a seed is crazy. That is true. You wouldn't necessarily memorize the full seed, but you'd memorize key sequences within the seed. Like, that's completely doable, I reckon. And Toka's saying, let's go gambling! Yeah. We endorse gambling on this channel. Well, what's Vandy gonna do? Fire me? I'm quitting anyway. Tetris 4, Vince. Tetris for Oofie. Vince having the lead at this point on 344,000, so it's not as neck and neck as it was at the start of the game. But you would imagine that scores would spread out. It's still very close between the two players. And Toka's saying, Sky being a true Briton. What have I done? What British thing have I done in the last 30 seconds? Oofie set up for a dirty Tetris. Vince taking a couple of burns. Oofie getting the dirty Tetris. And Toka's saying the Britishness I'm doing is gambling and alcoholism. I can't say that's wrong. But it's 364,000 for Oofie, 438,000 for Vince. beginning to hit the run up to level 19 at 104 lines. Coincidentally, given that they're playing Tetris at the same time, Oofie is also hitting the run up to level 19 at 110 lines. This is considered shocking news in most Tetris circles. Tetris for Oofie, 416,000, 489,000 now, 512,000 for Vince. Vince having a strong lead here, and Oofie needing to pull out something in level 19 to have a chance at taking this game and taking the advantage into game 4. A couple of doubles there, or a couple of singles even there for Vince. Vince on 517, 464 now, 488 as Oofie hits level 19. Vince hitting it on 524. Not on the strongest of boards, but on a board that is reasonable. Oofie is up high, gets the bar across, gets the Tetris. Tetris for Oofie. 540 now, almost caught up with Vince. Vince's lead mostly gone, but Vince getting a Tetris, Oofie not getting a Tetris. Oofie hanging some pieces, this is dangerous. Gets a good couple of points in, gets a couple of burns in. Oofie not out of trouble yet, gets a triple. Gets a single, getting the board down now. $5.56 for Oofie. $6.36 for Vince. Vince having the strong lead again. Vince Tetris ready, gets the Tetris up to 673. Oofie on 594, waiting on that bar. Oofie getting high, did not get to take advantage of those last couple of bars. Let's see what he can do. Tetris for Oofie. Vince in a little bit of trouble, but getting out of it. Tetris for Vince, up to 724. Oofie's board, it's looking like something. It's looking like it's burnable. And it's looking like it's being burnt down. But that score is about 100,000 points lower than Vince's, with Vince having 764 and Oofie having 677. It's a strong advantage for Vince here as we hit level 26. I don't know if Oofie can realistically close this gap. Although if Vince not taking any Tetrises for a little while, and Oofie taking a Tetris or two, that gap's gone down a bit. 800,000 now for Vince. 745 for Oofie. Oofie in a little bit of trouble here. Hits level 27. Isn't on the greatest of boards. Tetris for Vince. Oh, hangs the bar again. Oofie in trouble here. Now the piece is going to let him live. The pieces are not going to let him live, and this will be game to Vince. And Vince will have the advantage into the 4th game here. Level 27 being the death of Oofie in 2 of these games. And they're calling it his new kryptonite. Why does Vince look like he has the sun staring at him every time he plays? I'm guessing either Vince has a really nice light in his room, or has a south-facing room, I'd guess, based on having pretty good lighting there. Loversman calling Vince handsome as fuck. New seed is B5, right, says Oofie. I think so. Yeah, B5. See, my room's a north-facing room. But I've got a roof room, so the light in my room's slightly nicer. Ready from Vince, just waiting on a ready from Oofie. There's the ready from Oofie. So get started in 3, 2, 1. Tetris. The problem with sunlight for my room is I'm in Wales. And while there is sunlight currently, there normally isn't. Apparently I sound like Norman Price when I say ready. I have no idea who Norman Price is, but we'll have to find out at some point. Turk saying I have sunlight for my room, but I just don't open the curtains because I'm Batman. Understandable. But our players are off playing Tetris. Speculators are saying that this is a video game that is being played, in which blocks fall down and people try to get Tetrises, and that Vince is on 69,000 points. Meanwhile, Oofie is on 53,000 points. To be fair, Loversman, I haven't watched Fireman Sam since I was like 4. Like, that's the best part of a few decades. You know? That's not like things I've been doing yesterday. Oofie, Tetris is up to 100,000. But, like, probably the reason I say ready a bit like, one of the characters from Fireman Sam is because I've been spending a lot of time in Wales since I lived there. And, Fireman Sam is set in Wales. Oofie getting a couple of awkward piece timings there and unable to take a couple of Tetrises. 130,000 for Oofie and 189,000 for Vince. Vince Tetrises. Oofie off to a bit of a slower start in this game. Vince, having managed to get a 100,000 point lead at this point, has a commanding grip on this game. Can Oofie manage to claw this back and stay in the set for a bit longer? We're at 65 lines on Vince's side, 66 lines on Oofie's side. And Vince has a key advantage here. Technically, Oofie is closing that gap. Not very quickly, but that gap is being closed. 261 plays 331, a slight lines advantage for Oofie. But that gap is slightly closing. It's now more like a 90,000 points gap as to a 100,000 point gap. You know, small goals. But they are still goals. Oofie in a bit of trouble here. Surviving. Still surviving. Still in trouble. Gets the Tetris, gets the board down. Still playing aggressively, though. Taking a couple of burns to get things more under control. 313,000 for Oofie. 426,000 for Vince. Vince now having a bigger lead. Thanks to this bit of trouble that Oofie has found himself in. Both players are playing cleanly at the moment. Oofie on 432,000. Vince on 481,000. But Vince with a few lines in the tank that Oofie doesn't. Tetris for Vince. That's a 5 of 5,000. Tetris for Oofie. Passes 507. Is now on level 19. Vince almost on level 19. Will transition 576. Now, Oofie's had some pretty decent pace in the early parts of level 19 in some of the previous games, so this might be his chance to really close up on Vince. And 586 on level 21 plays 611 on level 20. Toka saying, go go Oofie. Vince in trouble. Vince not in severe trouble, but is high. And isn't necessarily getting the greatest of pieces for burning. Is getting higher. This is dangerous for Vince. Can Vince survive this? I don't think Vince can. And that's going to be the game. And Oofie scored a few more points in that bit of time. And Oofie has the game. We go to a decider. GG's for Vince. Also, GG's for Oofie. GG's from Vince. So another game decided by who's better at surviving. Tetris for Oofie. I don't know how maxable this one is, but pop off. Is it 800 by 25 or 800 by 26 you need to get for the max? I can't remember. Do I look like I do much maxing? $800 by 26, that's the goal. This does not look 800 by 26, I have to say. It looks like a better game than I've ever done, because it is. But given we're on 26 and 747, could be a 900. Tetris is. Don't know what Oofie's DAS PB is. GG's? Yeah, GG's. But a strong game nonetheless from Oofie. So we will have a decider between our two players. hopefully a entertaining decider. We have Vince on the right and Oofie on the left. Ready from Oofie. And hopefully in a moment, yeah, c6? I think it's c6. Ready from Vince, so we'll get started in 3, 2, 1, Tetris. And we'll go. The Tetris pieces start falling. They are the same Tetris pieces for both players, which I think is good news. An early burn for Vince. An early... Oh, that's an interesting board for Oofie. But Oofie gets a Tetris out of it. So this strat isn't completely a bad idea. I mean, I wouldn't call it a good idea, but it's not a complete bad idea. And technically Oofie has the pace lead here. By about a nothing anymore.